what position group, to remind people, perhaps people just tuning in, do we think has a chance to be, or do we think has a chance to be better than any of last year's segments? And I want you to answer first, Corey.
Are cornerbacks their own position or secondary?
So that's kind of where we ended up. I gave it to Tom first. Tom said corners. I was thinking more like position group, meaning secondary. And I said if I had to pick one, I would go with secondary too. But he went with cornerbacks, and I think that's probably the right answer.
I think because we think Azaria is making a leap into being like potentially a early round, first roundish type pick.
Yeah, he's got a higher ceiling for sure.
But Fintrell's still. I mean, I think, and also another thing, Fintrell's been better. It's only been 4 practices, but Fintrell just looks like he's more engaged, more excited to be playing football at Florida State this spring than he was last spring when he got here. So that's been nice. But last year you had Azaria as your number 3 guy. That's a pretty good rotation. Renardo, NFL guy. Fintrell, solid college quarterback. And then Azaria, a burgeoning star. So it's hard to say when you lose Renardo Green and we don't know who's going to be that third guy that it's better. But that's the only one that even comes to mind as being possible because of the leap Azaria might make.
Yeah, and I think those corners, your starters are going to play the majority of snaps. I honestly think they forced Azaria on the field sometimes last year just because they wanted him to be out there. I think you can play 2 corners 90% of the snaps, and if those are your 2 corners, I think they're better. Renardo's great, but I think Azaria has a higher end to just make some of the wow plays.
Agreed.
Game changer.
I think secondary in general, I would just say big picture secondary, I think has a chance to be better.
I agree.
Because I think Earl Little Jr. is going to be really, really good too, and Shaheem's should have his best year. And
you're not losing like a really good Akeem Dent because he was banged up. You know, Akeem Dent was great in the Florida game, but it's not like you're losing a safe because that's your main loss is Akeem Dent at safety. We don't know who's going to take over, but Akeem throughout the year wasn't himself. He wasn't the guy that ran a 4.38 at the pro day.
Sorry, Ira, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, that was what I agree. The secondary as a whole, and I think there's a bunch of guys that have the potential to be real. I mean, Earl Little, I think, has been very impressive since he came in. You add in, some of those young guys now that are developing, Conrad Hussey and Jalen Barker. I just think there's a lot of potential. KJ Kirkland, there's a lot of potential in that secondary I think that group could actually end up being better, but corner, if I had to pick one spot, would probably be it.
I want to point out that it's an interesting question because I get that at their highest level, the talent of a Keon Coleman is a healthy Keon Coleman, let's say, is better than what you have here. But I actually do think you could make a case to project a more productive wide receiver core than what you had last year.
I do too. I don't think I've seen it so far through 4 practices, though. That's my caveat. That's my pushback a little bit to that. I haven't seen one of those guys be like, oh, man, that's an NFL player right there. That's a great play. You've
seen Destin Hill look worlds better than he did a year ago.
You're right. And Destin Hill, to me, through 4 practices, he's been, to me, the most impressive guy. And you're right. I think the floor will be much higher. The depth is certainly better. But you just don't know if you have those 2 top-end guys that are mismatched nightmares.
Yeah, and you guys watched probably all the one-on-ones. I have not watched really many at all of the one-on-ones. So I'm curious your guys' takes on this. Because to me, what concerns me about that receiver group from when I watch them in 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 is, man, they're guys that can run fast and they can make plays. And if they're open, they'll catch it. How are they with the contested catches? Because that's where Keon was so good. That's where even Johnny gets credit, blame, but Johnny made some great contested catches. Are you seeing contested catches from those guys? Because to me, that's going to be a question we have to see answered.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to obviously grow into it. I like Corey's saying, I think I'm solely making the argument that I could reasonably project that enough guys will take a step forward, that they could be more productive because they're going to be a lot deeper. So, they could take a huge step forward at that position. Plus, you have a big-armed quarterback that's going to challenge down the field. So, Yeah, I don't know yet, Ira. Not enough practices, right? And I don't get to see none of us get to see the scrimmages. So I mean that's the hard part. But I do think Hakeem is going to make contested catches. He's a big body. He's already made some contested catches. If Kentron Portier can stay healthy, he's going to make contested catches. He's a big-bodied kid. Good Lord, I guess we could probably say that about some other guys within that group. I don't know if Darion Williamson or whomever. They've got some dudes, and then they have all of that speed. It's just so silly. Again, I think that Benson's going to be very, very good. They've got some fun guys, some fun options, and Destin Hill has had an awesome camp so far. So,
but to answer the question, no, you don't see it it's clearly the level you saw it last year with Keon and Johnny so far. With the contested catches. Now
Keon was a freak. That was what he did better than everybody else, maybe in the country. I mean,
but it was Johnny. It was their game.
That's their game.
We're going to throw it up to 14. Right. We're going to throw it up to 4. If you defend it, you defend it. But that's going to be there. Good luck trying to defend that. Most teams couldn't when they were healthy. This receiver core isn't going to be as good as that because how could they be? But they will be. They might be even harder to defend. Game plan for, I guess.
Because they can run away from you.
You knew what the game plan for Florida State was going to be. They're going to take shots down the sidelines with those two guys. Especially in Death Valley that day. That's not part of this. I don't see that being a part of this game plan a lot, but they're going to have guys from the slot running posts. They're going to have dudes on the outside just running by you or trying to. But yeah, I haven't seen, it's interesting. Hakeem this month, Hakeem's not been bad. He's been perfectly fine. I would like to see that dude maybe separate himself a little bit, but that's a lot to ask. He's a redshirt freshman that missed a lot of time and is coming off an injury. But he's a guy, they have like 3 just wild cards. I have no idea how good he's going to be. Jalen Brown, the last practice I saw, looked great. How good can that kid be? He's a redshirt freshman. Malik Benson's never been a guy counted on to make a bunch of plays. And then we've already talked about him 5 times. Destin Hill, that's a wild card. He might be awesome. I don't know. He looks really good in practice.
I feel like both would have been really good last year at the end of the year if they'd been healthy. I think Hakeem is a true sophomore, is he not?
He is.
Oh, yeah, I keep saying redshirt freshman.
Yeah, he's a true sophomore, but he's going to take a step, and I think he'll be a very good receiver. And Destin Hill, by the way, we know he was on the path to be getting a lot more looks, and then he got hurt. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Those dudes got hurt. It was not about ability. And Hakeem, by the way, had completely bought into blocking. That's why he was getting more reps. And then he got hurt. And damn it, man, that's the story of the last season. The offense had a bunch of guys riddled with injury.
And it could just look different, in terms of like those. Because what I'm thinking about is like those third down catches. So it's 3rd and 7, things like that. Well, where I think it may be Malik Benson, Ja'Kai Douglas are those guys, kind of like Micah Pittman, those kind of slot guys that can make, because I think Benson, one thing we've seen so far from him is I think he's comfortable in traffic. I mean, we've seen him make
got good hands.
Yes, he's got very good hands. So those guys could fill that role. Maybe they're not the big body guys who could post up defenders, but they're sure-handed. But then you've got all these other guys who can make the big plays. Again, that's my only concern is I just want to see those guys. Can they be dependable in those big situations? Because look, man, Darion Williamson is a talented guy, but we've been waiting for 4 years to see him be a guy who you can depend upon. Portier's the same deal. Like, I get it, it's injuries or whatever, but he also has not been that guy. You got to depend on somebody.
We only have about 3 minutes left in this hour, but I want to ask you this, because the only other place that I would have looked on the field, and I understand there's no Trey Benson here, but they're pretty loaded at running back, guys. That's a deep running back room, and I think there's some guys that will emerge as consistently good players there too, maybe more than you had a year ago.
I'm really curious to see what they do with the carries there, or the reps.
Yeah, because Keziah had a long run in the last practice. We watched like a legitimate 50-yard touchdown run, and he's a guy. All of them. Like I was telling Aslan the other day, it's like I keep forgetting Toafili's on the team. Like just because, and Toafili's good. He's made a lot of big plays for this football team. He essentially won them the ACC championship game in the defense did, but he scored the lone touchdown. He's a really good spot college football player that has made a lot of really big plays, but it's just like you forget about him. Keziah, they don't have they're not the home run hitters that Benson was, but collectively There's a chance, right? There's a chance.
Roy Dale Williams, Cam Davis, Jalen Lucas, Singleton. I mean, they've got dudes for days, and they're all
Lucas
different.
especially. Lucas is the guy that you kind of like. You're doing this. Like, how are they going to use this dude? What are they going to do with this guy?
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit more like what we've seen from running backs under Mike Norvell in the past. Like Trey was so, I'm not going to say feast or famine, that's not fair, but it was so, there were probably more, there were more plays that didn't get what they could have gotten.
Yeah.
Because his vision wasn't where it needed to be. But then he hit some home runs that had no business being home runs. Right. And so I think this will be maybe more consistency, but not as many home run plays, unless it's
the running
Lucas.
Game in general. I think they're going to be better up front in the offensive line than they were a year ago. They've got a ton of depth at running back and a lot of versatility at running back. And I just happen to think that that's going to be the biggest difference in this year's offense, because it'll allow them to challenge the ball down the field, because you're going to have to come up to stop the run. I think they're going to be able to run the football. I really do. They struggled to run last year, with the exception of the home runs that you're pointing out.
So is running back you're not expecting them to pick up another running back in the
I don't think
portal. They've got like 7 of them.
Yeah, they don't. They do not need another running back. But that spawned a lot of fun conversation, because we're not saying that these groups are all definitively going to be better, but they have a potential both at wide receiver and running back. I think.
And I think when you look at it, though, right, like when you look at this team, none of us here are thinking this team is better than last year's team. It's not constructed top end. It doesn't maybe have the talent, but the bottom end is better,
much better.
I think the depth chart is more talented from top to bottom than it was last year. But you probably don't have a Fisk and a Verse and a Keon, but you have some, again, good college football players from top to bottom now.
The one last spot I was going to say real quick, because we've touched on it before, is defensive end. You're not going to have a Jared Verse, but I think that second team defensive ends could be better than what you had last year. Which, I mean, that's a big deal, man. If you're rotating guys in, I mean, is Marvin Jones coming off the bench, or is Sione Lolahea coming off the bench?
Yeah,
that group could be a problem. That second group on the defensive line could be a problem.